An outpouring of support focuses on the Orlando nightclub shooting survivors and employees. How innovation and new technologies are improving healthcare in developing countries. And the battle over Brexit hits the Thames. Africa 54 starts right now.
Good evening and welcome. I'm Vincent Makori. This is Africa 54. Now, 4 days after the worst mass shooting in U.S. history, the Orlando, Florida community continues its support of the victims of the Pulse nightclub massacre. It was Latin night when a domestic terrorist opened fire at the predominantly gay nightclub on Wednesday. VOA met with survivors of the horrific attack. Arasha Rabasadi has this report from Orlando.
Early Sunday morning, a gunman opens fire, killing 49 and wounding more than 50 clubgoers at Pulse in Orlando, Florida. The predominantly gay nightclub had hosted a Latin dance party.
This was an attack against a gay nightclub. It's an attack against gays, an attack against Hispanics, but let's think about reality. This is an attack against America.
On Wednesday, Florida Governor Rick Scott visited the center, an LGBT community group, as a show of support. Inside, volunteers stocked emergency supplies and remembered Orlando as it was before Sunday's horrific events.
Being here was like a haven because I didn't have to hide. I didn't have to watch what I would say. I could hold my girlfriend's hand and be me, you know, just like a straight couple would. I didn't see why I would have to act any differently, so that was really nice.
And now, just days after the shooting spree, support comes from unlikely places.
Certain restaurants that have bluntly said that they do not support the gay, lesbian, bisexual, transgender community, and they have brought us food. So to see that, you take a little moment in your heart and you're like, whew, and breathe and be like, that is beautiful.
But it's not all beautiful. The mass shooting is another reminder of the ease with which anyone can buy a semi-automatic rifle.
Where are those laws against the hate crimes and the gun violence? That is what is important. We have to protect us and everyone.
Let's mourn with these families. I've talked to families since Sunday, and the stories are heartbreaking.
From heartbreak comes resilience. On Wednesday night, local bars held fundraisers for the former employees of Pulse. The nightclub was more than a hotspot, it was also their livelihood. Arasha Rabasadi, VOA News, Orlando, Florida.
Now, for the latest on the Orlando shooting and President Obama's visit, VOA's Ramon Taylor joins me live via Skype from Orlando. Good afternoon, Ramon.
Good afternoon, Vincent.
Now, we know that the president will shortly be arriving in Orlando. Tell us how significant his visit is.
It's incredibly significant for the victims and for the families of the survivors of these victims to have a chance to speak with him personally, as he's done so many times after so many horrific tragedies. It's really become, unfortunately, a norm for this president more than any other president in U.S. history, and this is going to mean a lot after the worst U.S. mass shooting in the history of this country. The families just want to be consoled more than anything else, but obviously they want to hear something about what the future is regarding gun violence in this country and whether more mass atrocities can be prevented.
And indeed, we know that the president has been very frustrated by this particular issue. What is the talk there in Orlando, especially regarding the debate surrounding gun ownership?
Yeah, the debate here is certainly existent. It's probably less pronounced, less vitriolic, I want to say, than the one that's going on in Washington and on the campaign trail right now. You know, everyone is very respectful of each other's opinion at this point because ultimately everyone wants to stand together and not necessarily say something that's going to, you know, break up that harmony or pit people against each other when this community has so much need right now. But really, we're seeing a lot of people saying, look, we want guns out of the hands of potential terrorist suspects. And moreover, do we need assault rifles in this country? On the other hand, we have members of Billy Graham, for instance. His congregation has come here in huge numbers, and they're saying, look, this could have happened with a rock, with a knife. That's not the answer. The answer are prayers. And so we've seen the whole realm of political ideology come forth just right here where I am now at Phillips Center to offer their support in the way they believe it is best. On the one hand, prayers. On the other hand, offering some sort of guidance on what the future politics should be of this country.
And we know that a lot is going on in trying to bring the city back to normalcy. But how is the tempo of the city? What is the mood like right now?
I think people are coming to terms more with what happened. This is one of those situations where you can expect the grieving process to go on far after the cameras have left, and that's one of the sad realities of a horrific tragedy like this. Is next week everyone will be gone, and what will be left are hopefully the support networks of the Red Cross that we've seen here, some of the other community networks to help provide guidance and support. You know, I've seen a member of the Red Cross just now come over and ask, "Can I sit with you?" to a girl that he saw crying here at the memorial. Again, I just want to show you right now. I'm here at Phillips Memorial Center, and this is a location where everyone has come forward in the past few days to show their support and, you know, lend a hand, whether that be through flowers. We've seen counselors come by with what are called comfort dogs to try to comfort the victims' families as they come forward. So really just coming together in any way that they can through what will be a very, very long grieving process.
Indeed, a long grieving process. Thank you very much, Ramon, for your reporting.
Thank you, Vincent.
VOA's Ramon Taylor reporting live via Skype from Orlando in Florida. Now, a site vessel has located parts of the missing Egypt Air passenger jet that crashed into the Mediterranean Sea last month, killing all 66 people on board. Egyptian investigators say an underwater robot operated by the company Deep Ocean Search found wreckage in several sites in an area where the sea is about 3,000 meters deep. Finding the Airbus A320 has been a race against time since battery-powered signals from the jet's flight data and voice recorders were expected to fade away by the end of the month. Now, the flight recorders could unravel the mystery surrounding the disappearance of the Paris to Cairo flight on May 19th. No evidence has yet emerged to pinpoint the cause of the crash. Authorities have not ruled out terrorism, although no group has claimed responsibility. Automated messages sent by the plane shortly before it disappeared from radar indicated there was smoke in the cabin, a fire in an adjacent lavatory, and a malfunctioning equipment in a flight control unit below the cockpit. Well, U.S. Republican presumptive presidential nominee Donald Trump early this week said he will no longer issue press credentials to the Washington Post, stopping the publication from gaining access to the press area at his presidential campaign events. Now, the Washington Post, based in the U.S. Capitol, is one of the country's most influential newspapers. It is unusual for a presidential campaign to refuse to issue credentials to news organizations. Now, for an examination of the Republican Party presumptive presidential nominee's relationship with the media, Rob Mahoney, Deputy Executive Director, Committee to Protect Journalists, CPJ, joins me live from New York. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Now, should the media be concerned about a possible presidency of Mr. Donald Trump?
Absolutely, because the candidate is behaving in a way which is aggressive towards the press by excluding reporters. And I think the fear is that if the candidate behaves like this, would the president, if Trump were elected, would he behave in the same way of attacking, vilifying, and physically excluding reporters who write stories that he doesn't like?
Now, you know, some, especially on the continent of Africa, are starting to draw comparisons with some of those, repressive regimes like, the Mugabes, those ones in Eritrea who do not condone or tolerate any free media. Well, can the U.S. get to that level anyway?
No, there are institutional protections for speech in the United States, which don't exist to the same extent in many other countries. So one would hope that the rule of law would obtain and that journalists would be allowed to do their jobs freely. But it's the tone of this campaign from Trump that is concerning. And it's also the fact that it provides an example of bad behavior for authoritarian leaders in Africa and elsewhere who can cite what is happening in the U.S. as an example to justify their own behavior.
Now, what can the media do at this point to counter that kind of attempt by Mr. Trump?
Well, the media can act in many different ways. The journalists can band together and just outright refuse to acknowledge this ban by insisting that the Washington Post and others be allowed into events, be accredited, or no one will go. That's one way of collective action. No one has done that yet. And by reporting on it and making it very difficult for the Trump campaign to go anywhere without their behavior towards the press being part of the conversation. There are many different ways that journalists can do this. Even by holding this interview now, I hope that we're contributing to airing the issue and putting pressure on the Trump campaign to reconsider its decision to ban the Washington Post from covering the candidate for one of the highest elective offices in the world.
We hope it will stop. Thank you very much, Rob.
You're welcome.
Well, Rob Mahoney is Deputy Executive Director, Committee to Protect Journalists, speaking to us live via Skype from New York. Now, South Africa is marking 40 years since the Soweto student uprising, which marked a pivotal turn in the fight against apartheid. As the nation looks back on the tragic violent protest, both old and young say their nation is better for it, but still far from perfect. Viewers Anita Powell reports from Soweto.
Joy in a place that has seen so much tragedy. This square was the scene of one of South Africa's darkest chapters, the 1976 Soweto uprising. Some 20,000 high school students marched to protest the apartheid government's insistence on teaching in the Afrikaans language. Police opened fire on the marching children. Estimates vary on how many children were killed. Some go as high as 700. One of the first victims was 13-year-old Hector Peterson. That fateful day, June 16th, is now celebrated as Youth Day. Many of the surviving students are now grandparents, but the memory has never left them.
When the shooting started, I was not sure it was a gun. It sounded like a cracker. Until I saw a boy was next to me bleeding from the hand. Then it's when I realized that actually these people are shooting. They are using a live ammunition. Students ran into the neighboring houses. Police followed by throwing tear gases around there.
Those horrors seem distant for today's children, but they say they are grateful for the sacrifices made by those who came before them.
Let us thank them for what they did for us, because we have freedom. We can do everything in this country.
The older generation says the efforts were worthwhile. When she was a student activist, Florence Kanye says she and her friends were repeatedly jailed and beaten.
It was worth it because what we fought for, what the other student that died fought for, at least we do have the freedom now that we were fighting for. Yes.
Young and old agree that South Africa has yet to live up to the ideals those students originally sought. Last year, university students held protests demanding free education. Protesters say the government's failure to support them is effective economic apartheid. The debate continues. The struggle, veterans say, remains the essential role of the youth. They have the rage, the time, the energy to keep up the fight, and hopefully make tomorrow's South Africa a better place. Anita Powell, VOA News, Johannesburg.
Well, I want to know what you think about Africa 54 and the stories we cover. Join the conversation on Facebook. The address is Africa54. And check out our headlines 24/7 on voaafrica.com. Find me on Twitter at VOA Vince Makori. Coming up, providing better health care through innovation. Stay with us.
Health news and notes. This is Living Better.
A Formula One racing mechanic can change a tire in seconds, but safety is just as critical as speed. This combination of skills is also being sought by doctors and nurses from the University Hospital of Wales in the UK as they try to save critically ill babies. Dr. Rachel Hayward.
If your mechanic doesn't put a bolt on a wheel correctly, then you may lose your driver's life on the first bend. You know, if we don't do something right in our resuscitation processes, you know, we lose a baby.
So nurses at University Hospital are training like an F1 team, working together to improve efficiencies. Louise Cleaton is lead nurse for the project.
Just knowing what kit we need and what is essential in that scenario, then it can improve things.
The hospital also records infant resuscitation efforts with on-body cameras. I'm Martin Seacrest for VOA's Living Better.
Well, joining us now is Africa 54 health correspondent Lino Madu. Now, what do you have for us today, Lino?
Observers say innovation is key in meeting many of the health targets in the Sustainable Development Goals if they are to be achieved by 2030. With innovation, health challenges such as malaria and HIV/AIDS and the provision of better tools and access to reproductive health can be addressed effectively. The Sayana Press Project is an initiative coordinated by the organization PATH and its partners, helping to make injectable contraception available to women in remote locations in sub-Saharan Africa. Now, to tell us more, I am joined by Fiona Walugembe here in the studio. She is a Uganda Project Coordinator of Sayana Press Introduction and Evaluation. Ms. Walugembe, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
So before we talk about the Sayana projects, can you give us a sense of the challenges for women, especially where you're from, in accessing reproductive health services?
Yes, thank you very much. In Uganda, women do have a challenge of the distances to access family planning products, because you find that, for example, a woman lives about 10 kilometers away from the nearest health facility. So she's got that challenge. And at times on getting there, she may not access a form of contraceptive of her choice because it's not available. And at times also their partners may not allow them to use family planning, yet it is their right.
Mm. And now here you have this project that you are coordinating, the Sayana Press Project. Tell us about that and why it is an innovation in its own right.
Yeah, first of all, what is Sayana Press? Sayana Press, basically, as you said, it is a new formulation of Depo-Provera, which is the traditional injectable contraceptive. The innovation is that the drug DMPA has now been put in this device called the Uniject, which PATH developed, such that we have an all-in-one device, injectable contraceptive called Sayana Press.
So before this version of DMPA, what was Depo-Provera available, injectable contraceptive? Was it available?
Yes, it was available, but at times it would also be stocked out in some places. And to mention, it is still available now. We are giving them both out at the same time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Now, tell us about the advantages, besides the fact that it's two-in-one, really.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Another advantage, as you can see, it's very easy. It's to carry, it is light, and it is very easy to administer, such that community health workers in Uganda have been trained to administer Sayana Press, and we are also doing studies on self-injection, and in the future it's likely to be self-injected. We are seeing results whereby 98% of the women in the study have been able to inject themselves safely without any effects.
Now, our mothers, grandmothers did have as many children as nature would allow. Now, why is it important for women to have access to contraceptive? Because we hear a lot about contraception these days.
Yes, it is important because family planning is important, first of all, for the health of the women, such that they have time to do other work, and also for the health of the children, whereby the mother is able to give enough attention to the child. And also economically, it is these days very important, looking at the economy, such that a woman is able to do other economic activities and also to plan for the family.
So what do you tell women, and how do they receive this idea of controlling or being able to control their children, how many children they have?
Yes, we do tell them the benefits of family planning, but definitely it's about choice. We give them the benefits and then they choose whether to use family planning or not. But we've realized that women are very interested in accessing family planning services.
What about the husbands? Because in some settings, they have the power, they hold the power to how many children, or even to the woman's health, really.
We have a program whereby we do male involvement. We've also educated the men, the husbands to support the women, and most of the men are coming on board. Yes, of course, there's still a few of them who are not in support, but with time, they're coming to appreciate the benefits of family planning.
So what kind of impact have you been able to witness for yourself? Because I know it's something that you use yourself, but in the community at large.
Yeah, in the communities, especially with the introduction of the Sayana Press project, I've talked of the community health workers. These are ordinary men and women who give services to the women. And because the services have been brought nearer to the people, many of the women have been able to access family planning services because the services are nearer to them.
Do you find women that are resistant, maybe a little bit about?
Of course, not many. We've not found very many resistant women because, as I've explained to you, we do tell them the importance. And we do a lot of counseling, and it's about choice. And to mention that we don't only talk about Sayana Press, but we talk about all the family planning methods, including the natural family planning methods, and it's about choice.
Okay, it's about choice.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Ms. Fiona. We appreciate your time.
Thank you very much.
And that's Fiona Walugambe. She's a Uganda project coordinator for Sayana Press Introduction and Evaluation with the organization PATH. Now, a blood diagnostic kit that can detect infectious diseases such as HIV and hepatitis B in just 2 hours is helping to track and better treat diseases in resource-poor regions of the world. In Malawi, an estimated 1 million people are living with HIV, the virus that causes AIDS. Vast distances and isolated communities make testing people extremely difficult. Hematologist Dr. Helen Lee realized that developing countries need a simple and rapid way to find out if they've been infected. More than a decade of development later, this is SAMBA, which stands for Simple Amplification-Based Assay. Put simply, it's a test that tells if a person is infected or if their treatment is working. Using a tiny drop of a patient's blood, the results are ready within 2 hours.
It's really quite simple. The patients come in and the sample is taken, and that then it gets tested. Within 90 minutes, you get the results.
The results are shown like a pregnancy test. 1 stripe is negative, 2 is positive. The device is dust and moisture proof, and both it and the testing kits can withstand the heat. The freeze-dried reagents are in cartridges that fit in the machine in one way only, meaning little training is needed. Crucially, Lee says, it eliminates the time gap between testing and when diagnosis results are ready.
It's very important to me that the tests are done then and there, and the results are given to them then and there, and the appropriate treatment or counseling should take place in one trip.
At her lab in Cambridge, these machines are being readied for deployment to the field. Lee's spin-off company, Diagnostics for the Real World, have used the tests to screen 40,000 people for HIV in rural Africa. Samba also won Lee the popular prize at the 2016 European Inventor Award organized by the European Patent Office, winning nearly 2/3 of the votes in an online poll. And that's our health report for today. So stay in touch for more. Find me on Twitter at Linor Moudou. Back to you, Vincent.
Well, thank you very much for joining us today, Lenore. Now be sure to watch for Lenore Moudou every Tuesday and Thursday for the latest health news in Africa right here on Africa 54. Well, it's time now for a short break. Still to come on Africa 54. The bizarre Brexit flotilla battle that rocked London. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Africa 54. Here's what's trending. Smartphones are drivers' biggest distraction, whether it is texting, cameras, or the internet. But a free app created by an Israeli company promises to use the same technologies built into mobile devices to map roads and monitor collisions in order to create a safer driving environment. The smartphone's camera is used as a dash cam that can also record video and other data. A network of drivers is created that can follow a map of a city with real-time warnings about dangerous locations or vehicles rated as driven recklessly. Now, the app was launched as a beta version in Tel Aviv and San Francisco, where more than 300 professional drivers connected to the network allowed the company to analyze 100,000 miles of road per week. Now, the Brexit debate takes a bizarre turn. What was quickly dubbed on Twitter the Battle of the Thames began when campaigners for Britain to leave the EU sent a flotilla of some 30 fishing boats up the river, decked in colorful flags and anti-EU banners. The leader of the anti-EU UKIP party, Nigel Farage, joined one boat, highlighting what the Brexit campaign argue is the damage being done to Britain's fishing industry by EU quotas. But as Farage sailed towards Parliament, the flotilla was challenged by musician Sir Bob Geldof on a rival boat full of Remain supporters who waved pro-EU banners and shouted abuse at Farage. Geldof sprang to global prominence in the 1980s with his role in raising money for the Ethiopian famine. And that is what is trending today. Well, and that's our show for today. Be sure to watch Africa 54 on our website at voaafrica.com. For more news, tune in to VOA's evening radio show, Africa News Tonight, at 1800 UTC. And in the mornings today, Break Africa between 0300 and 0600 UTC. That's Monday through Friday. Thanks a lot for watching from all of us here in Washington. Have a good night.